is also illegal in Alberta. Not allowed to do that. We still do not know to this day what chemicals were injected. Encana claims we injected nitrogen, pure as the air you breathe, that's it. I don't believe that for 1 minute. I did do some Freedom of Information searches. We have 50% oil cuts. We have a huge blowout that happened where they pumped all kinds of chemicals down right in groundwater flow to my water well. But the regulator, none of the government officials, none of the regulator staff will make Encana disclose the chemicals. They publicly, the regulator publicly says, we will tell you the chemicals if you ask us. I have asked many times. Encana gets to investigate itself. That's wrong. I'm a scientist. I've worked in this industry a long time. I worked for Encana for years. When somebody gets caught breaking into the bank, so you're a bank robber state, right? You got caught stealing the bank at Slave Lake, and the RCMP come and they fingerprint you and the bank. Or would they give you their kit and say, why don't you fingerprint the bank? What would you do with the fingerprints? And then they blamed their local water well driller. Now my big involvement in my own community, I was very busy at this time, and people came to me with a document by Encana that looked like the company was trying to get blanket approval. And they were getting suspicious. The landman wouldn't answer their questions, it was telling all kinds of strange lies to them. They knew I was working for Encana at the time. They said, can you help us? I looked at the document, I said it violates Guide 56, I will call the manager on the document, and I did. He said to me, Jessica, if we can get everyone to sign the document, we don't have to consult with anybody. How important is consultation to you here? Very. And me too. I was working for Encana, doing consultation for them up in Northeast BC. So I said to the manager, wait a minute, you have to consult with my community. I'm working for you, I'm north consulting for you. You want to pull a fast one on my community? Okay. We'll do an open house. And the very next week, same landman, same inappropriate document, same lies. The people came back to me saying, geez, Jess, they're back at it. So I took my 2 dogs and I went for a long walk, knowing I was walking into hell because I had to resign. How could I work for a company lying, not just to me, but to my community? And I did in writing. Canada finally holds an open house just because I resigned, it appeared. And they promised us, this is October 2004, March of 2004, they had already fracked our aquifers. They promised us they would never be anywhere near our fresh water. In fact, far below the impermeable layer to prevent gas from migrating into our water. And then they did a very evil thing. Another evil thing. They promised a tiny little crumb to one part of the community, the Rosebud Dinner Theatre. This divided, to this day, and completely conquered the community. We used to take care of our own. We used to raise our own money when people were sick. In my community, a child had cancer. The Lions Club donated all the money they were raising from the Rosebud campground to give him the treatment he needed, and he's now a young man going to go traveling in Europe this summer. That's how we used to take care of ourselves and our communities. We didn't take a little bit of money in exchange for our freedom of speech, in exchange for our community strength and unity, our love for each other, our love for our land, our people, our families. It's a very successful technique. And then the Rosebud water tower blew up in an explosion. They blamed a propane torch. But an investigation, I found an old archive newspaper article that said an accumulation of gases. If it was a propane torch, they would have said propane. Seriously injured our water manager. Encana promised $150,000. The new water tower, this is the old one, this new one here is underground now. That cost the community about $650,000 to $700,000. They are paying for it. My water dramatically changed. I stopped doing dishes because I didn't know why. Because I didn't know any of these things at the time this was happening. I was getting incredibly painful cracks in the skin on the top of my hands. I didn't know why. But negative feedback, right? It was hurting. I used to keep a very clean home and kitchen because I happened to her. Their water was also contaminated up by Wetaskiwin. Soaps and shampoos no longer made suds. Lots of things happened. My taps were whistling like a train coming. There was so much gas coming out of them. One Christmas, I couldn't even close my kitchen tap because there was so much gas I couldn't shut it. I had to go down to the Watson barn to turn it off. And it wasn't until one day my dogs backed away in revulsion that I just knew we had been lied to and something was wrong with the water. This is my water after fracking. Do you remember the 2003 test by Encana on my water appearance clear? I do know some of the people who did the research at Lloydminster for the CAP study that specialized in gas migration. They came and took a look at my water and said, this is really bad. You better get it tested. They taught me how. I did. Encana's noise is getting worse. The regulator, I presented all kinds of evidence of non-compliance to the regulator, documents of non-compliance. For example, they did a noise study and had the noiseless compressor that was keeping me up at night turned off for the study. And they deregulated, or tried to deregulate the Noise Control Directive 38 in response to Encana's non-compliance to make it compliant, and they wanted to increase the rural noise. 5 decibels, that's a lot when you live rural. You have a pretty quiet community. So I sent out a warning email. I hit the send button, ran to the airport to do a fracking CBM tour for the First Nations in the Yukon, and came home to a letter. I thought, I'm going to get regulation. Oh, they're going to tell Encana, stop the noise. They're breaking the law. No, the regulator banished me. I have instructed my staff to avoid any further contact with you. I work in this industry. I believed in Canada. I believed in our regulators. I was absolutely horrified. This is the letter. They copied the police. Do you remember when the EUB got caught spying on innocent Albertans? Did you guys hear about that all the way up here up north? Well, they got caught spying on innocent Albertans. They also got caught violating privacy rights. They got caught breaking the law. That's when the government changed their name from EUB to ERCB. But they also fired these guys got fired in that scandal. And these guys were copying this letter. So I wrote a letter to them saying, under what jurisdiction can you find someone guilty before proving them innocent? Where's my hearing? Where's my trial? They judged me making criminal threats with no evidence. I was never fingerprinted. I was never charged. The police never came and threw me in jail. I'm not a protester. I'm a scientist. I don't even go with protest signs anywhere. And this is how serious I took my banishments. They refused my mail. This is Express Post. I send everything registered, so it's tracked. And this was in my mailbox on the same day that this was on the front page of the Edmonton Journal. A reporter had read some quotes of mine in the newspaper in the Yukon, wanted to interview me. They just happened to come with their camera person the day I received my lab data showing I had dangerously contaminated methane in my water. A technical briefing. I find this very interesting. This is the crux of the matter. Before the presentation, a fellow talked about, well, yes, there's science and there's evidence and there's cases like mine, but what it really comes down to is money. And I would agree with that. That's what it used to be, until I don't know more. Because I think Idle No More has made a massive change, and a bigger change in countries elsewhere in the world than even here. We're very slow in Canada. Yeah. But the Idle No More has started something that goes beyond money. And it is heart and people and community and saying, enough is enough. So things are really changing. However, this technical briefing, water wells, money. Water well investigations are expensive. So, well, it becomes standard that we don't bother doing them. What do they do? We have a lot of cases where gag orders are signed, money. I will not sign a gag order for my lawsuit. I will not settle. Because this case is not about me, it's not about my water well, it's about everybody's water. And Encana's technical briefing also says, if water supply is a problem, they'll supply it. That's a lot in writing. They don't. The government knew they had failed us. They promised the families affected, not just me, the Campbells, the Zimmermans, $6 Signers, Lordsons, a number of families. The Jacks up in here, in your neighborhood, up by Spirit River, they were promised alternate safe water deliveries now and into the future, regardless of whether the methane was caused by nature or in fracking aquifers. And the government finally comes to test, and on the 3rd, Al Strauss, who had been testing for Alberta Environment many years, he's horrified by my water. He looks around at my corrals and he says, "You don't have cattle." "No, I have no cattle. I work in the patch. I'm always on the road." "Well, you caused this dangerous contamination because your cattle aren't drinking water. You're not using enough water." 3 days later, we had an emergency meeting with Guy Boudelier, our environment minister then, with his hydrogeological staff, Deputy Minister Peter Watson, Assistant Deputy Minister Bev Yee, and they looked us in the eye and said, "You caused this terribly dangerous contamination because you use too much water." Me with 2 little dogs. So April 2006, the government finally mandated baseline testing, but only for shallow pool bed methane. They can frack shales above the basic groundwater protection on horizontals, on deviated, and they don't have to do baseline testing. So this is my place. This is where the water tower blew up. This is about 6 miles around my place. The red dots are all the wells in fracked, where the freshwater zones are, above the basic grade groundwater protection. The black, which you might not be able to see very well, but all these black dots, these are the legal land descriptions of all the conventional wells and deeper unconventional wells. Industry calls this carpet bombing. I call it flea-bitten